My name is Jonah Creed, and I have been blind for 10 years, but I hear the truth in cold steel. The fire that took my sight left me with an anvil, a hammer, and a gift I cannot fully explain. When I strike a blade, the ring tells me its history, its flaws, its hidden fractures, and its lies. I live alone on a forgotten patch of ranch land, mending tools for the few who remember I exist. One evening, a woman's footsteps approached, light and urgent, carrying the scent of prairie dust and dried tears. She spoke my name, Jonah Creed, and her voice was a trembling thread of hope and old sorrow. She placed a broken cavalry saber in my hands, the steel cold and jagged, heavy with unspoken tragedy. "This was my father's sword," she said, "and I believe it holds the secret of his murder." Her name was Clara Whitfield, and her father had been a captain under Colonel Sterling at Fort Dominion. He died in the skirmish, she was told, but the sword was returned shattered in a way that defied reason. I ran my fingers over the break, feeling the grain of the metal like a blind man reads raised letters. Then I lifted my hammer and tapped the blade, listening not with my ears, but with my entire damaged soul. The steel screamed a high, crystalline note that fractured into a discordant wail only I could perceive clearly. I heard a deliberate flaw, a microscopic void woven into the forge, weld by a hand that meant murder. This sword was betrayed before it ever tasted battle, I told her, and she gasped sharply behind me. I could hear her heart pounding, a rhythm of grief and anger, and I knew I would help her. Clara told me Colonel Sterling now owned the largest ranch in the territory, rich and untouchable by law. He had given her father that sword as a gift, she said, and I heard the final piece click. Sterling had the blade sabotaged so her father would fall in combat, unable to defend himself against the ambush. I asked her why she came to me, a blind blacksmith, and she replied, "Because you see what others cannot." Her words kindled a fire in my chest that had been cold since the day I lost my eyes to flame. I agreed to ride with her to Sterling's ranch, to use my ears as the only weapon I needed. That night, I packed my anvil hammer, not as a tool, but as a tuning fork for the truth. We set out at dawn, her horse beside my mule, and the sound of her breathing became my new compass. The trail was dangerous, but I could hear the rattle of a snake before it struck, and I warned her. She began to trust my gift, and I began to trust the gentle way she guided my hand forward. By the campfire on the second night, she told me about her mother's garden and her father's lullabies long gone. I told her about the forge fire that blinded me, and how I learned to hear the world instead. She touched my scarred eyelids and said, "You see more clearly than any man I have ever known." In that moment, the darkness behind my eyes filled with a light I'd forgotten existed, warm and golden. We reached Sterling's sprawling ranch on the fourth day, a palace of timber and stolen wealth looming ahead. Sterling met us on the porch, his voice oily and confident, flanked by hired guns with cold, dead eyes. I held the broken sword up and said, "I have come to return your blade, Colonel, and its confession." He laughed, but I struck the steel against my hammer, and the discordant scream sliced the air like a shard. Every man there heard it, a sound so wrong and jagged that even the horses stamped in sudden nervous fear. I spoke aloud what the steel told me. This sword was forged with a void to snap at the hilt. Clara stepped forward, her voice now steel. "You killed my father, and the metal itself will testify." Sterling's hand twitched toward his revolver, but I heard the leather creak of his holster before he moved. I shouted a warning, and Clara ducked as a bullet cracked past. Then I swung my hammer at the sound. The hammer struck Sterling's wrist, and the gun clattered away, and his men hesitated at the impossible blind strike. Clara grabbed the fallen revolver and held the men at bay while I knelt beside the riding colonel. "Confess," I said, and I placed the broken blade against his throat, feeling his pulse betray him. He stammered out the truth. He had killed her father for a gold claim and made it look like war. The hired guns lowered their weapons, and the ranch foreman, an honest man, took Sterling into custody for the marshal. Clara wept against my chest, and I held her, my own tears soaking the blindfold I wore for the world. That day, justice was not blind. It was guided by ears that heard the scream of a murdered man's steel. Clara and I stayed at the ranch to help the foreman sort the legal mess, and we grew inseparable. She became my eyes, describing the sunrise, and I became her shield, listening for any threat in the dark. We discovered that the gold claim belonged to her family by right, and Sterling had forged the deed. Within a month, the law restored the land to Clara, and she asked me to stay forever as her partner. I married her under a cottonwood tree, and the preacher said words I could not see but deeply felt. I built a new forge on our land, and the first thing I crafted was a ring from the broken sword. Clara wore it always, a circle of redeemed steel that had once carried betrayal but now held eternal love. Our ranch prospered, and I became known as the blind smith who could hear the truth in any metal. People brought me their tools, their weapons, and even their wedding rings, asking for my ears to bless them. I taught my son, born a year later with perfect sight, to listen to the ring of the hammer. He learned that steel is not dead. It remembers every hand that shaped it and every blow it endured. Clara planted a rose garden near the forge, and the scent mingled with coal smoke in a beautiful, strange perfume. I could hear the roses grow, a soft rustle, and I never missed the colors because she painted them with words. One day, a stranger brought a bent iron cross from a burned mission, asking if I could hear its story. I struck it, and I heard the prayers of the faithful, the crackle of flames, and a final hymn of hope. I told the stranger it was blessed, and he wept, and I knew my gift was never meant for violence alone. Clara often sat beside the anvil while I worked, and her presence was the rhythm that steadied my hammer's swing. She said I was her miracle, and I replied that she was the light I never needed eyes to see. We grew old together, and our grandchildren would bring me scrap metal, begging to hear the secrets inside the iron. I would tap each piece and invent wild, wonderful stories, and their laughter was the sweetest music I ever heard. The legend of the blind blacksmith spread, and young couples came seeking rings forged with a blessing of truth. I never charged them, only asked that they listen to each other as carefully as I listened to the steel. On our 20th anniversary, Clara gave me a new hammer with a handle carved from our first apple tree's wood. I struck it against the anvil, and the sound was so pure it brought tears to my blind eyes. I knew then that my life had been a forge, and every blow had shaped me for this perfect final form. The broken sword that started our journey now hangs above the hearth, a testament to truth and redeemed love. Clara sometimes traces the blade and whispers, "Thank you for screaming," and we laugh at the strangeness of fate. I am still blind, but I see everything that matters: her voice, her touch, and the heartbeat of our home. If you ever hold a piece of cold steel, remember it carries the memory of the fire that shaped it. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the truth that the world tried to bury in silence. Please subscribe to Stories Hub Official, smash that like button, and ring the bell for more frontier miracles. Tell me in the comments what you hear when you truly listen, and may your love always ring true. Our story proves that even the most broken blade can be forged into something stronger, truer, and everlasting. So never underestimate the blind, the broken, or the quiet, for they may hear what you cannot yet see.